Boy, these things are heavy. I like to thank everyone, and I like to thank all the kind words. But I like to particularly thank the Board of Governors for making this possible. It's an amazing thing to have, God, do I have to give a speech? I mean, everyone said what I would like to say, but anyway, again, thank you, and I'd like to thank my friends and supporters and people who've been there through the years, when I didn't have any money, they were there. So I thank you, and members of my family are here, and so I'd like to give thanks to them. But the thing is, when I went to UCLA, it didn't have very many people of color there. But UCLA was a special place because it made you create. It gave you a camera and said, "Look, go out and make a film, and don't come back with something we've seen." And so it had this built-in kind of philosophy that you had to do something different. They didn't want to see anything that they'd seen before, because they had this end of the quarter screening, which they crucified you if they seen anything anything actually that looked like Hollywood and made it, So it was sort of an anti-Hollywood feel at the time, but it's since changed, it's gotten to be more so. But I think the thing is that I had some really wonderful teachers, and one particular one, Basil Wright, who was a documentary filmmaker. He did Song of Ceylon. I remember having difficulty when I first went to UCLA in terms of not knowing what to do, because when I was there, they had the end of the quarter screenings, which were the best films that made at UCLA, but they were all about flower children, people who made films in Topanga Canyon, and were exploring their own sexuality and stuff like that. But where I came from, that wasn't an issue, It was about getting a job and keeping a job, And so those are the kind of films I wanted to do, and it was Basil Wright who sort of pointed me in that direction. And the other thing that would made it worthwhile and gave me some guidance was the fact that there were people of color who came, and we had these meetings every night, and we lived at UCLA. We went down to Westwood and spent all night in the restaurants, until they kicked us out. And we talked about what is a black film continuously, what is our responsibility, what do we have to do? And out of that came people like Julie Dash, Haile Garima, and a whole bunch of other people who are well known at the moment. But we also were a part of the civil rights movement. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and our obligation was to tell our stories, because Hollywood, and I don't mean any disrespect, but they had been distorting our image since Birth of a Nation, So it was incumbent upon us to tell our story, our narrative in our own way. And so my interest in film and my ideas came from that period, and working with a bunch of students like myself who were interested in making a difference and using film as a means for social change. Thank you. In this business, you get a lot of negatives, a lot of rejection. And my first rejection, and it sort of prepared me for, this business in a certain way, was when I was in junior high school. I had a teacher, and it was a history class, and I had a speech impediment that was very bad. I guess this teacher thought I was, had mental problems or something. I don't know. But anyway, so he one day stood in front of the class, and he looked over the class, and he walked down the aisle, and he pointed to different students, and he said, "You're not going to be anything. And he went down the aisle saying to each one, and he came to me and pointed his finger and said, "You're not going to be anything." Okay, and I remember that. I remember to this day. In fact, I've never forgotten because it always had an impact on me. And because of that, I never really felt secure in what I was doing. I always thought that it was something that I couldn't do and that it wouldn't have any meaning, or it just wasn't worthy. And so I never really felt that what I was doing had any, in spite of the fact that I studied with these other film people, that what we needed to do was make film a tool for social change. I still had these problems of thinking that what I did had some significance or meaning. But things like this, getting awards like this, really make what was said in the past insignificant. You know, what words were given, these unkind words. You know, so yeah, so people. Yeah. So I mean, people ask me when I was out on the red carpet getting interviews and pictures taken, and they said, "Well, what does it mean to you getting this?" Well, it means that, you know, I'm getting further and further away from this stigma. I mean, there's this feeling that, you know, that is not going to have any meaning. That I don't have, you know, what it takes to make things work. But one of the things that what tonight does, in a way, you know, the teacher I was talking about, his name is Mr. Baker, and I don't know if he's still around, but if he is, I do hope he reads the trades, you know. But I remember, but one other. I'm probably rambling and going on, but there's one other thing I'd like to comment on. I mean, I have these words I've written, but I see they cut them off because I'm not following script. So I apologize for that. Because anyway, this last bit of story I'll tell you. When I was working on The Sleep with Anger, it was a company, a TV company that wanted to develop a story, and we started off with this other story I wanted, but they started to screw around and wanted to make changes, but it was based on a real life story, a lady who was killed in my community by a gang member, and the police talked her into being an eyewitness to testify in court, and she did, but they gave her name out in the press, and one of the gang members killed her, you know, killed this lady. And I thought the whole system failed, so I wanted to do a story about that. And so this company started to screw around with the script and wanted to turn it into, you know, something altogether different. It had no meaning in anything. And so I said no. So I said, let me do something that has no particular meaning. It's fictional, make-believe. And so I started writing Sleep with Anger. And so there was it's a story about two generations, and it's a family situation where one of the sons follows tradition, the other son doesn't. You know, he's sort of like wants to get rich, and he doesn't care about anything except for money. So anyway, there was a long scene I wrote. So the folks, the company that I was developing the film with, how they had impact on the film was, or the story was, that you send in an outline of treatment, and if it's something they like, they'll send a check. If it's something they don't like, they'll tell you, well, the check is upstairs, you know. So you would send something, and well, the check is upstairs. That means go back and rewrite it, you know. And so you say, well, something simple, why don't you send a check downstairs and put it in the mail? No, well it happened, you know. And so this would go on and on. And so there was a scene that I wrote. It was quite long. And so they rejected it and said the check is up in the mail. And I said, well, I saw this PBS story about a Horton Foote story. And there's a long scene on the veranda that went on and on and on. And they said, yeah, but you're not Horton Foote, you know. Okay. So I took the script back and got another producer who was in favor of doing the film that liked it. And so many years later, this will be short, many years later, I had finished the film in Africa. I was doing post-production in Africa, you know. So I get this call from the States, and they said, we want to give you an award. I said, oh, fine. They said, but you have to be here to get it. I said, but I'm in Africa right now. Well, you have to be here. And I said, well, can't someone else get it? They said, no, you have to be here. And so I'm getting kind of angry a bit, you know. And so I'm trying to be cool. So I said, well, you sure I can't come? He said, no. I said, but I'm in Africa. It takes 14 hours to get there and all this sort of thing. But you have to be here. Okay. So I said, well, what is the award? They said, well, it's the Horton Foote Writing Award. So I said, I'll be there. So anyway, thanks a great deal. It's meaningful. Thank you.